Hello, today I'm going to talk about 5 folk horror short stories. If you've watched my channel, you know I'm a fan of folk horror and Gnostic films. I have a few folk horror top 10 lists. I'll put one above. All of these are great to watch for Halloween. I also have an underappreciated horror films video, which is quite long, but I think there's some great films in there. But before we get started, what is folk horror? Well, there are a few tropes that it has to have. A rural, isolated setting, community or ritualistic practices, the threat of the past or the land, psychological dread or moral unease, blurring of the ordinary and the uncanny. So many of these stories include these, but some deviate from them slightly. But one thing they all have in common is the everyday hiding something sinister. The familiar becomes threatening. There are subtle undertones that makes the world feel off. But with that out of the way, let's get started. The first story is called The Summer People by Shirley Jackson from 1950. It follows an older couple from New York who spend every summer at their lakeside cottage in rural upstate New York. One year they decide to extend their stay into September against the locals' subtle but unmistakable warnings. This was first published in the New Yorker. I'm a big Shirley Jackson fan. You can check out my video on her story, The Lottery, if you want to know more about her. But one of her strengths is that she unravels things slowly. The scenario builds very leisurely, setting up the mundane. Then, one by one, the services are cut off, resources vanish, neighbors turn indifferent. As the two realize what could be going on, isolation closes in. The beauty of this is that it leaves you wondering. It also does a fine job of slowly introducing the threat. The reader starts to get it long before the couple does, but I think Shirley Jackson really knew how to weaponize the ordinary. The story takes something totally mundane, staying longer at a summer cottage, and shows how it becomes an impossible mistake. She slowly drains it of normalcy and safety. This banal approach makes the terror stick with you. Readers think to themselves, this could happen to me. It makes it way more scary. It's also why The Lottery is so scary. But I think that's the strength of most folk horror, is this idea that this could happen to me. I could turn down the wrong road. I can stay too long in the wrong place. The next story is Children of the Corn by Stephen King from the book Night Shift from 1978. Probably the most famous King folk horror story. Outsiders stumble into a rural town where kids worship he who walks behind the rows. There is something incredibly scary about an empty road with cornfields on each side. It seems mundane, but it is not, and I think Stephen King knew that. These kind of questions pop into your mind. What's inside the fields? Why are there no cars or trucks going by? It takes something ordinary, small town and farmland, and twists it into a nightmare of isolation, religious mania, and violence. Here's a bit that quantifies this feeling. He had a strong sensation of being watched. It was a feeling he had read about in books, mostly cheap fiction, and he always doubted its reality. Now he didn't. It was as if there were people in the corn, maybe a lot of them, coldly estimating whether the woman could get the gun out of the case and use it before they could grab him, drag him into the shady rows, cut his throat. But not knowing, this absence of threat really grabs readers, in my opinion. King also describes the earth totem handicrafts extremely well. It was a crucifix that had been made from twists of corn husk, once green, now dry. Attached to this by woven corn silk was a dwarf corn cob. Most of the kernels had been carefully removed, probably dug out one at a time with a pocket knife. Those kernels remaining formed a crude cruciform figure in yellowish bas relief. Corn kernel eyes, each slit long ways to suggest pupils. Outstretched kernel arms, the legs together, terminating in a rough indication of bare feet. Above 4 letters, also raised from the bone-white cob. I-N-R-I. Pretty chilling, actually. In the climax of this story, there's another very, very vivid description similar to this one, but I'm not going to give it away. It is quite a reveal, and it's pretty awesome. Another thing that makes this story scary is the term "he who walks behind the rows." There's no explanation for what this is. It evokes agriculture, nature-bound, liminal deity or spirit, or the Celtic Cernunnos. It echoes the Wicker Man's corn mother or an unnamed agrarian spirit. But I think the scariest aspect by far in the story is the way that he talks about the children. Their presence or absence, their malice, etc. "Do you hear it?" she asked as he joined her. "Hear what?" "The nothing. No cars, no people, no tractors, nothing. And then from a block over, they heard the high and joyous laughter of children. The kids are incredibly creepy, and their absence is even creepier. You just don't know where they are. One of my occupations is as a teacher, and it's hard to reason with children, especially if they get the notion into their head about something. But I also think children are closer to the land, playing in the dirt and the muck. You can see them making a totem very easily. They often do things without thinking. They often do things without considering the repercussions. And they almost always follow the older kids' lead. All these things make children feel unpredictable, and in the correct circumstances, very, very scary, especially if there are many of them. But there are many differences between the story and the film. The film is enjoyable, but I think this is much better. In the short story, it's short, brutal, there's no hope, it's nihilistic, it's got an almost Lovecraftian vibe. The movie is padded out, adds characters, gives a happy-ish ending, and turns it into a franchise machine. I also think it treats the children differently. But there are other bonuses to reading this instead of watching it. The dread is amped up because a lot is left to the imagination. In the story, the rules of civilization have collapsed in a more tangible way. This makes the cornfields themselves feel alive and hostile, like nature is coming after you. One other thing this does a great job with is humanizing the protagonists, but also making them unlikable. There's almost a satisfaction in the ending that shouldn't be there, but it is. My third story here is The White People by Arthur Machen from 1904. A strange diary reveals a young girl's unknowing initiation into an ancient otherworldly cult. So Arthur Machen is a Welsh author. It was first written in the 1890s, but published in 1904 in Horlocks magazine, but edited by Machen's friend A.E. Waite from the Rider-Waite tarot deck fame. It was later reprinted in Machen's collection The House of Souls from 1906. So it opens with this line: "Sorcery and sanctity, said Ambrose, these are the only realities. Each is an ecstasy, a withdrawal from the common life." And I think this line sums up the story in some ways. The premise starts with three men in an existential question about sin and evil. The rough miner or puddler, the untrained, undeveloped tiger man, heated by a quart or two above his usual measure, comes home and kicks his irritating and injudicious wife to death. He is a murderer, and Gilles de Rais was a murderer, but you see the gulf that separates the two. The word, if I may so speak, is accidentally the same in each case, but the meaning is utterly different. Gilles de Rais, between 1432 and 1436, allegedly abducted, tortured, and murdered numerous children, with estimates ranging from 60 to over 200 victims. So Machen has a point. We often lump all sins into one basket, but you could have a murder of rage versus, serial murderer, and those two things are very different. But this notion leads into the presentation of a rare book. I mean, how many stories have started with this trope? It is called The Green Book. It kind of functions like H.P. Lovecraft's Necronomicon or The Diary in the Dunwich Horror. Some of the magic words and names in The Green Book are actual occult terms, but Machen invented many for the story. This makes it weirder to some degree. It's similar to like with H.P. Lovecraft's mythos, how a lot of the words are made up. But the story does a peculiar thing after this conversation. The conversation is nearly all dialogue and little description. Once the book is presented, it shifts to first-person POV, the young girl's diary, and what the man reading it is thinking. Machen turns childlike wonder into something eerie and disorienting. I'm going to describe it a bit without giving any spoilers away if I can. It involves a secret wood. Stones and flowers are these kind of totemistic symbols in it. There are vivid descriptions of trembling and the heart beating, ladies and serpents. It's all presented in this elemental, symbolic way. The people of white are something like fey beings, but also something more monstrous. But you're not really sure if this is in the child's imagination or not. I'm not going to say any more, but it really sticks with you. There's definitely a melancholy to the story, also an inevitability of sorts. Machen suggests that true evil is not loud and monstrous, but hidden in strange, intimate glimpses of another personal world. It's also about the strange things we witness when we're alone. There's one thing, if you don't like long paragraphs, I'd steer clear of this story. There's one paragraph that is probably about 200 sentences long. I'm not joking. While reading it, I couldn't believe how long it was. It just kept going on and on and on. In basic writing, that's something to steer clear of. I'm not sure why he did it. And I did find it a little bit of a slog to read because of this. I got through it, but some may not. In the end, though, I think it was worth it. In the Hills, the Cities, Clive Barker from Books of Blood, Volume 1, 1984. A folk horror tale set in the Yugoslav countryside where ancient traditions collide with modern anxieties. It blends political undertones with unsettling imagery to explore the cost of collective identity. So I think the first half of this story is pretty straightforward. Two male lovers on a road trip through Yugoslavia. But the second half turns grotesque and surreal like most of Barker's work. This is body horror, yes, but of a different kind. There are no Cenobites. It's not really gory in that way or torturous in that way, although there is some aspect there. But what I think Barker excels at here is there's just enough information to set the horror in place, revealing a bit more of the mystery as it goes on. But his story is about the beast of human organization, the insanity of the state over the individual, and the sacrifices the individual makes for the state. At one point, a character says this of the horror: it is the body of the state. This is a subtle commentary on collectivism, identity, and the loss of individuality. The story lingers with you because it's weirdly disturbing yet poetic. It's a bit longer than the others on here, but the last 5 or so pages are pure gold. What ends up happening is just like, oh my god, I can't even believe this. The final story is The Black Stone from Robert E. Howard, 1931. The Black Stone follows a traveler who uncovers the eerie legends surrounding a mysterious monolith deep in Hungary. It's a chilling mix of folklore, history, and cosmic dread that foreshadows later weird fiction. So if you don't know, Robert E. Howard is best known for Conan the Barbarian, Solomon Kane, and Kull the Conqueror, but he has worked in many genres. And this isn't much of a stretch from sword and sorcery. I mean, a lot of that genre includes elder gods, dark sorcerers, and earth magic, and that's all here. It was first published in November 1931 in Weird Tales. I really enjoyed the backstory that he put in here and the detail that is in this. This monolith is a cursed object, kind of a MacGuffin in some ways, but I think the story really goes for it. There, among many strange things, I found mention of the Black Stone, that curious, sinister monolith that broods among the mountains of Hungary, and about which so many dark legends cluster. Anyone that sleeps in the vicinity of the monolith, they will be haunted by nightmares for the rest of their life. If you venture too close, you die raving mad because of something seen there. It instills fear in the peasantry, like good horror should. Once men tried to destroy the thing, but each man who laid hammer or maul against it came to an evil end, so now the people shun it. But then there are other peasants who see it differently. He advanced the theory that the degenerate villagers had used it as a sort of altar on which they offered human sacrifices, using as victims the girls and babies stolen from their own ancestors in the lower valleys. I think that's one definitive trope of folk horror, is the different lineages of townsfolk, how some go down dark paths. I'm not going to say where the story goes, but there is one scene that was quite brutal, and I was shocked speechless when I read it. It really went there. My mouth is just hanging open. But like I've said elsewhere, Robert E. Howard's language is quite visceral and charged with exhilaration, and that occurs here as well. But this nails atmosphere and pacing. It's a slow build from folklore and rumors into full-blown nightmare. It feels grounded and otherworldly, and I think the final reveal lands because Howard doesn't over-explain it. He lets the horror linger in the air and in your imagination. But that's all I got for this one. I'll probably do a part 2 of this at a later date. If you want to recommend others, comment below. And like I said, I have a few folk horror cinema videos if you want to check those out. But that's all I got. Enjoy the October weather and Halloween when it comes. Take care. Have a good day.